G'day, everybody. How's it going out there? Well, today we're going to talk about John Henry. What is this, English class? So anyways, John Henry, a steel driving man, if there ever was one, ended up dying. So if you're not familiar with the Americana story, since this is World in Review after all, one of the classic American stories that we learn in English class and in social studies in a way is a story about a man named John Henry. Now it's a tall tale story which have kind of gone out of the wayside. Most tall tales these days are conspiracies, am I right? But back in the day you used to have tall tales that would tell tales of sort of telling something about the world that they lived in at the time using these characters that are kind of larger than life. And John Henry was a steel driving man. So this has to deal with when America was, creating these large railways to go across the continent. And, the story was about a machine that could drive steel and a tank of a man named John Henry who could also drive steel. And, he was one of the most efficient, most proficient workers that could drive steel at the time. Usually he's characterized as this big, burly, black American man, right? With a big frickin' hammer to drive the steel. That's usually how his character is portrayed in art. The interesting thing about the tragedy about the story is that they basically drive steel through sort of this mountain area, and basically John Henry and the machine basically have a contest, and John Henry basically, I think it was, I don't know, I can't remember if he won or not. I think he kind of got close. I think they kind of tied, and he just beat him out just slightly. It was close, but unfortunately, as a result, John Henry passes on because he exerted himself so much that he ended up losing his life. And that's sort of the tragedy of John Henry. Now, what does that have to do with furry? And what does that have to do with anything? Well, recently in the art world, as computers start to integrate more and more into the lives of people, we find ourselves in this pass once again. Only instead of driving steel this time, it is in the creative arts. So for those of you who are not familiar, there has been a plethora of artificial intelligence computer systems, computer programs that basically use artificial intelligence in order to take a prompt and basically sample a bunch of artistic pictures and things like that and try to combine the ideas in the prompt to create basically pieces of artwork based on the prompt given, using images and using artistic pieces. DALL-E 2 is one of the most well-known. DALLE 2 is one of the more well-known ones, but there are many others, and including one that we'll talk about a little bit later. But the thing of the matter is that the art is actually not horrible. It can get a little uncanny valley sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's passable, right? It's getting to the point where it's certainly not the kind. It's sort of the kind of art that you'd put on the fridge, right? If your son or daughter did it, but this is not a son or daughter. This is a machine, right? So as artificial intelligence, art generation becomes more prevalent in society, certain furries are starting to take stances on it, whether it is a good thing or whether it is a bad thing, right? Whether a fur ain't nothing but a fur, I'm going to draw and use my art and, kind of heck with the machine, I'll do it better than the machine can and stuff like that. So that being said, made an article here, and we have the article up on Flayra.com. A link is in the description below to this article. But this is basically the full thing. It's not anything too major. I just wanted to keep it down and parse to the facts and stuff like that. Tried to keep any sort of fluff or anything on there. Dogpatch also covered this, but he added a little bit more fluff about his feelings about how AI will impact the future of things. But there's no real feelings in this article. It's mostly just goes over the fact that Fur Affinity basically drew first blood and basically says that artificial intelligence generated art will not be allowed on the platform. And this was announced, I think it was on September 5th. So basically, it just basically says like what you're not allowed to use, and basically, and why Dragoneer made the decision. The big reason that Dragoneer made the decision is because he found an example of where artificial intelligence was basically taking the art and kind of combining it into a thing, and you could see a sort of example of where a bunch of the watermarks / signatures on some of the art pieces that were perused by the artificial intelligence were kind of meshed together as if it were part of the piece, but it really wasn't, right? So it basically shows that the artificial intelligence doesn't understand the concept of copyright or watermarks. That computers don't understand the concept of ownership in general. But the owners and the people who are overlords of the AI should understand those concepts. But basically, it's that artifact was there, and he says this is too much, right? It's taking samples of art from everybody on the internet and putting it up there, and so he's not a fan of said things. Though, he doesn't believe that that's a great move forward, right? So basically, that is what that is. Now, Dogpatch covered it from a different angle, and his article I'll link in the description below as well if you want to read it. But he mostly goes over the fact that when synthesization and other such things came to be in the music space, a lot of people thought it was going to be the end of music. Video killed the radio star, which no, not really. Music is still an audio based platform. Though the means under which musicians share their content has changed. They basically can make videos and put them on MTV or YouTube. If you want to talk about the modern sense, things evolve. They don't die, right? They change. The mediums under which we share things change, but they don't die. And under that idea, Dogpatch indicates that, hey, these artificial art generations could be used as complementary tools, such as like digital art platforms, such as Adobe, Adobe. God, I'm such a non-artist. Like MS Paint. I'm an artist. No, I'm not. MS Paint, yes, MS Paint, the premier art studio, Photoshop, I think it was, but I don't think people use Photoshop for that anymore. What is the new art platform? I don't know. I'm out of the loop. Hey, using MS Paint. There used to be a draw program that had simple shapes and stuff like that. It was interesting. I played a lot with it when I was playing on the Mac, the computers in school, because I grew up in a school with that. But basically, they were basic shapes and stuff like that. You could drag the shapes around. It's interesting. Some of the first programs that you could do that with. I'm old, as you didn't know, but that's not the news. The news is that artificial intelligence is taking over everything. Damn computers. Anyways, but Dogpatch's take on it is that, like the synthesization became a part of the music, and just another instrument for musicians to use to create new ideas and process and pieces. That's probably what's going to happen in the artistic world. But I got you even better, Dog Patch, because I have an example that's on Fur Affinity. Don't tell Dragoneer. There's a piece that uses artificial intelligence. It's on Fur Affinity right now. You want to know the piece? Here it is. It's by Rick Griffin. It's called Ronin. Basically, the idea and the premise behind this one. Now, if you don't know Rick Griffin, he's very well known in the furry community for house pets, and he's a kangaroo. I think his character's name is West Side of Heaven. So, kangaroo character, represent. I love it. But that being set aside, this is an artwork piece that he did. Now, this is not entirely AI generated. This is partially AI generated. It's AI supplemented. The art piece is augmented. My vision is augmented. So basically, the concept is that the most of the cyberpunk, this is a cyberpunk piece, which makes it work, honestly. If you're going to use AI, use it for cyberpunk pieces because, it works. He did basically the most of the background, right? The background overall is done by artificial intelligence, and he basically supplemented the piece by putting his character on a motorcycle in the foreground. So basically, in that sense, can artificial intelligence be used to create original backgrounds for furry art? Because, let's face facts. Furry artists in general, I think the biggest weakness that a lot of furry artists have, and this is just me for somebody who's perused multiple pieces, I think backgrounds tend to be, furry's weakness. Now, if they're cartoony, yes, but if they're like realistic, there are some furries who do it well. And honestly, the people, those that do that and work really hard on it, it's like, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work. Now, those people might find themselves in a bit of a stint because if a person knows how to feed good prompts into the AI to generate a great piece like this or a great background like this, then they can supplement their skill on that. Now, is that fair or is that thing? Now, that's a whole different debate. It's going to be an interesting debate to have. Because if you think about it in this sense, right, your AI all of a sudden becomes a partner, right? You are sharing responsibility pieces. You're giving the piece character, and it's giving it a background, or it could do vice versa. Though I think computers would be better at understanding background information than foreground information and characters, because that's kind of more finite and fine if you think about it. So I think artificial intelligence might be very well adapted to generating backgrounds in art particularly. Now, the problem is that drawing backgrounds is a skill. And is it fair to the people who have spent their time and toil learning how to make backgrounds that all of a sudden all those background pictures they've put up on the web as sort of a portfolio are now going to be used by their fellow artists to generate artificial backgrounds, right? Instead of collaborating with the artists, right? Instead of artists talking to each other and collaborating as a team, now you just have to talk to a computer and say, create me something out of the work of all of humanity put together and give me a background I can use, and voila, ta-da! Look, now it's sort of my art piece because I stuck a character in front of it. Is that fair? That's not for. Ironically, it's a very moral gray area. Will we be looking at, in the future, if we have AI-generated artistical works, should there be a legal idea of putting the metadata of all the pieces that it used to reference and the weight of those pieces to generate the new artwork? You know what I mean? It's sort of the concept of fair use. If you think about it in a very weird way, it's sort of similar to how fair use works, right? If I were to use music in this video and sort of take a little snippet of music, right? If I use a large enough snippet of music, then all of a sudden I get hit with a copyright claim. But if the snippet is small enough, it's considered fair use. So can an artificial intelligence that uses a bunch of data from a bunch of pictures, can the weight under which it gives towards a picture, if it's past a certain point, should it be considered that the original drawer of that picture that is used at that percentage should get a percentage and has a percentage ownership, right? Similar to and YouTube certainly has implemented something where you can clip things, right? You can clip this video right now and you can share it with other people, a small little part, and you can put it on your own thing and you can share it with others and it'll give them a small little piece, but it'll link them to the whole video if they want to see it. That's the concept of fair use, of stemming and plugging and playing. And the idea that, and a person on the other side, because I didn't really go into depth about arguing the other side, right? I kind of went into why it's quote unquote bad. But if you think about it, right, artists in a human sense do that, though at a much slower pace. They learn in school or they learn from reading and doing things on how to make good art. And they find inspiration. There are a lot of furry artists that you'll see whose style seems similar to another furry artist. And it takes a very discerning eye to distinguish the difference between the two. Now, sometimes people wear that inspiration on their sleeve, right? And say, I was inspired by this art, like my written work was inspired by Homer's The Odyssey. And it's like, well, isn't everybody's? But that kind of thing, like the Idiot, like things like that. It's like, oh, I was inspired by Hamlet or things like that. And as a written author, right? So you can create a new story that's sort of derived from the concepts of another. Same with art. And the difference is that you can either wear that inspiration on your sleeve or you can try to obfuscate it, right? And that is the thing that artificial intelligence hasn't learned yet because it doesn't understand the concept of ownership. The artificial intelligence is not going to come to Rick Griffin's door and go, hey, buddy, I heard you use my background. You need to give me permission. You need to give permission to the computer here to use my background. The computer is not going to come after Rick Griffin for using its background because it doesn't understand that it created it, right? And it doesn't understand the concepts of copyright in any of this. So that's why artificial intelligence, when it comes to quote-unquote ownership, currently right now, most people consider it's like, well, the computer doesn't own anything. And it's like, okay, great. So you can do things like this. But the computer, took inspiration from something. And how much percentages of inspiration did it take from those things? And if it took a large enough percentage of inspiration from one particular piece, shouldn't that artist also get credit for that background? Which is why the concept of metadata may come into play. How much metadata can a computer use on a particular piece before it violates the concept of fair use? Before it's no longer inspired by the art, but basically almost tracing or ripping it off, right? And I think those things, as younger people get more involved in the concepts of politics and trying to define where the gray lines become more black and white, right? I think that those things will be done over time, and it'll be very interesting. But for now, that's how it impacts the furry fandom. If you have AI-generated art, don't post it on Fur Affinity, except if your name is Rick Griffin. Though I would say Rick Griffin's is sort of a mix, so I don't know whether or not that will be banned. Nobody tell Dragadeer about this picture, because he will have a cow man. To be fair, they posted this picture on Fur Affinity before the ban was put into place by Dragoneer. So, but I think it's also, it might not be the spirit as to what what Dragoneer was trying to get rid of. Like basically, it's easy for AI to generate a bunch of pictures constantly, and you can see a future in which, a furry art site can easily get bombarded by, furries just randomly posting artificial intelligence pictures from fun little prompts they put in the thing. And he doesn't want, the content that is created to be obfuscated by artificial intelligence pics. Usually they're not supplemented with things that the artist did themselves and spent time on. And I think that that's sort of the spirit of the rule that he made. I don't know. The rule is how it's enforced. It's not how it's written. He says artificial intelligence things are banned. Well, how do you prove that it's artificial intelligence? If the artificial intelligence becomes good enough, how do you prove that it's artificial intelligence? That's going to be the interesting thing. And that's why the metadata thing may need to be implemented, as they said earlier. So, what are your thoughts on this particular situation? Are we all now going to be part of the Datadyne, furry art Datadyne network? Is Skynet going to be a bunch of fluffy griffins raining down artificially drawn fur pictures from the heavens? Let me know what you think. Kick the like, kick the subscribe button, kick a comment in the comment section. It's great to be back. Hopefully I'll try to get more videos in every week. I'm doing something else right now. I'm keeping it under my hat, but it's taking up a lot of my time and a lot of my bandwidth and a lot of computer power. So I use this computer for that while I'm not doing this recording, basically 24/7. I'm not playing games on it. I'm actually just focusing on this thing, and I'll let you know about it when it comes time. But until then, we'll see you again next time for the next week's video. It's good to be back. Thank you, everyone.